one more second and then we'll get started. Awesome. We are live. All right. Laura, I'm going to share my screen and kick us off. Hold on one sec. All right. Welcome, everybody. So I know everyone is dying to know what is behind the ATS system. And so I'm so thrilled to have my friend Laura Leach and fellow career coach, former recruiter, former ATS salesperson with me today. So we're going to get into that in just a second. Before we get started, I always do my spiel to help support these conversations, to continue to bring them to you for free. Please like and subscribe the channel. Here's your quick reminder. There's just a red button to click on and then give us a thumbs up. Set your reminders for future conversations to make it super easy. And if you do subscribe, then feel free to use the chat to drop your questions in as we are having our conversation. I'll keep my eye on it down on my phone. All right, this is brought to you by my passion project, Her Career Studio, helping women early in their careers create a career that they love. So if you or someone you know is a woman that is looking for group coaching support and mentorship, please have her check out hercareerstudio.com. Or drop me a line and I'd be happy to chat. All right. Let me stop sharing that. So welcome, Laura. So thrilled that you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Go ahead and I'm going to change my view to have you be the speaker. Go ahead and just kick it off by introducing yourself, how you became a career coach, and a little bit about your background in this space.
Yeah, thank you. So excited to be here and thanks for having me on. I am a certified career coach and almost complete with my master coaching certification. So I'm super excited about that. But I spent 23 years in recruiting. I started off in technology, working at agency and then being a corporate recruiter, and eventually made my way into my own company. And honestly, I had one of those moments where I woke up one day and didn't want to go to work and I wanted to quit myself and my own job. And I looked for mentorship and some guidance and direction, and was able to really analyze all the things that I loved about recruiting and bring them into one program. And that's how I ended up becoming a career coach.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, so we are talking today about the dreaded ATS system, and there's so many, points of view online, and people, now that we're in this virtual world, I started out my career walking into a swimming pool with my resume, like asking about a job, right? Some of that still happens, but gone are the days of just kind of passing paper around. And so in, I believe it was the 80s, this thing called applicant tracking systems came into play, right? And so recruiters were thrilled to be more efficient. Do you want to walk us through a little bit of the history behind the ATS system?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. So applicant tracking systems were a way to capture all of the candidates that were coming into an organization. And it was also considered kind of the first employment record. So if you did get hired, that would be the record of employment and kind of the beginning of your journey at the organization. And they evolved over time, and a lot of them had some functionality and didn't have some functionality. Oftentimes companies would attach it to their payroll system or their back end HR system. So they would create their own custom little kind of ATS. And then over the years it evolved. I think Monster is still probably one of the biggest ATS systems that has collectively bought a ton of different companies and piecemealed it together. But there are a lot that have evolved and have gotten a lot more efficient because of AI and machine learning. I will still say, even though the evolution of ATS is pretty sophisticated, the parsing, and I want to explain what parsing is, the parsing system still sucks. It just does. And so what parsing means is when you apply to a position and you fill out the application and you attach your resume, or you just send your resume in, the ATS will kind of scan it and populate the database as best as it can. That technology, albeit is supposed to be bleeding edge AI technology, still sucks. And the reason being is it doesn't know how to pull all of the right information. It's really taking a guess based off of all of the resumes it's ever seen, name, phone number, kind of experience, and it pulls off dates and tries to populate it based off of what it could imagine it should be pulling off. And again, there's that what it should imagine it should be pulling off is helping fill it out. And I think that becomes an obstacle with a lot of people who think, oh, if I don't have my resume written properly in the simplest, easiest form or format, then I won't be seen. And that's really not true. I will say most recruiters that I know that use ATS systems to their ability will still open up that PDF or that document and look at that resume, even though it had pre-populated the application area of the ATS system. Mm-hmm. So just know that even though it's bleeding edge technology, it's not. It's like thinking about how we have copier machines and, after a while, they just get fuzzy and we don't even use copy machines anymore. And now we scan and it doesn't know how to fill out it doesn't know how to populate a database, sophisticated database. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, great. So that's the first myth bust, right? Is this ATS optimized resume? There's a lot of screeners out there. You can go online, you can get your resume reviewed by another form of AI to kick out feedback for you. When it comes to just the resume, we're going to talk a little bit more about the flow of the application and the questions you might fill out through that system and all of that. We'll get to that in a second. But just the resume itself, how important do you think it still is to make it formatted in a way that the human eye is going to be flowing and reading it?
That's actually a great question. I am 100% like I will tell you at the end of the day, you should be handing your resume to somebody and not applying online, but that's a whole different conversation. But if we think about the way that we read, it's like the letter F. So the top part of the most valuable real estate on any document is going to be the top left-hand corner. And we kind of read down. The way that I end up putting resumes together is think about how the human eye works and how the human brain works. And honestly, we're a little lazy. Think about Cliff Notes, right? We will open up a paragraph in a book or open up a book, read the first page of the first chapter and maybe even the last. And we're like, okay, I know what that chapter is all about. And we move on. And we want to think about our resume the same way. So we, oftentimes I'll even say, the first 1 to 2 bullet points are just as important as the last 2 on the first and the second page, because that's just what our eyes do. We read this information, we go across, we go down, we pop up at the things, we flip it over, we look, and then whatever is down at the bottom, right? Just think about how our brain works. And honestly, how lazy we kind of are. So I like to utilize that knowledge and think about it and make sure that what I want the audience to see on the resume, I am giving them that optical flow. So I'm telling the story and I'm not letting them make assumptions on the story.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I do a lot of resume reviews, which I'll mention at the end today too, that people can send their resume to me and then I'll pick through it. And I do exactly that, like skim it at first and give video feedback to say, okay, if I was a recruiter and you checked all the boxes for me and I open up that resume to look at it virtually, what am I going to notice? And what are the red flags that might be coming out? Because to your point, I still know recruiters that will literally print them off too, right? As much of a virtual world we're in, sometimes people need to do that practice. Yeah. And so making sure that it is printable and it's formatted in a way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, let's talk more about the actual system itself and how it functions behind the scenes. So someone goes, let's say big tech, right? A lot of people want to know how to get into big organizations. And why did I get kicked back a rejection email within 10 seconds or 10 minutes? Like, obviously no one looked at my resume or my information. So what's up with that?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And everyone, it is, okay, so here's the myth, right? I'm going to myth bust this. It is a person behind the ATS. And there is a process that happens that recruiters sit down with hiring managers and we'll take a job description. Usually I'll take a job description. What was the last product manager we hired? It was so and so. Great. Let me get that job description. I'm going to give it to the hiring manager. They're going to go through it and scrub it down. And like, we don't need this. We don't need that. And I'll give you like a real live example. I had to hire a product manager in general for a retail company. I worked at the Gap, but this one was very specific about like the back end payment. They needed to know like that type of technology. So it was very specific. So we had to add that language to this kind of generic product manager job description. And then we took it off when we didn't need it for the next one. So I worked with the hiring manager to make sure that everything on the job description was the ask, right? The ask of the job. And then when I put it into the ATS system, again, it parses, just like it parses your resume, it parses the job description and puts it in there, and it'll start populating certain areas that I can then decide, is it a required field and what are my requirements? So I need this person to have this payment. It's a required field. If they don't have it, they're going to get kicked out. It is 100%. It is a hard no, right? If they have 3 to 5 years experience and they didn't click that box, or they had 5 to 10 years experience, whatever my ask is, if it's not meeting that criteria, it gets kicked out. Like, these are hard no's. And if you look at a job description, you'll see company information on top. We're looking for a product manager that does this to join the team to do this. That's the ask, right? And here's what you're going to do when you get there, job responsibilities. And then the requirements right down at the bottom. And you'll notice on the requirements, there's usually the top 3 requirements are the hard no's. If you don't have them, that's it. And then you'll notice it was like, nice to have, it would be great if, and then slowly as it goes down, that laundry list of ask isn't as prioritized, it's not prioritized. So I always think the first 3 to 5 bullets of the job description, of the responsibilities, and of the requirements are the most important. And that's typically where you're going to see the fields that a recruiter can program into the system and say, they have to have an MBA, they have to have a higher education degree, they have to have 3 to 5 years experience, they have to whatever, right? Those are required fields. If you don't meet them, you get kicked out. And then you get immediate thanks. I call it a thanks for playing letter, right? Immediately you get this thanks for playing letter. And does it mean that you couldn't have gotten the job? No. It's just the way that the system is set up, which is why I always say try the side door, right? Not necessarily on the applicant tracking system, because that way you can tell your story better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So people get so frustrated because they're like, I am qualified. I know I can do this job, because who knows our own experience better than us?
Right.
But to your point, there's especially like big tech or big organizations that have sometimes thousands of applications.
Yeah.
It's simply a way for the company to be able to filter.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
They're only going to hire one person out of 1,000. You have to have a way to be more efficient. So that's the why behind it. But to your point, if you have someone advocating for you, or referral or something else that can get past the ATS, then maybe someone will actually give you a chance.
Yeah, I always think about not past it, get around it. How can we get around it, right? And how are there the other ways to get around, as I call it, the side door? Because a recruiter may have, you're right, to your point, 1,000 resumes for one role. Think about product managers or customer success managers, hottest jobs on the market right now. And you're going to have everyone hitting that one click. Apply. There has to be some kind of screening. I will tell you, a good recruiter will probably take the top 12 resumes that really caught their eye, and then go and do a deep dive with them and narrow it down to 6. And then maybe those 6 will get submitted to the hiring manager, and the workflow process in the ATS system will happen. And Lisa, you could probably jump in here. A recruiter has forwarded you a resume through the ATS system, and then you have actually a different user experience or lens on what that actually looks like.
Yeah. So my background is being the hiring manager, sometimes acting as my own recruiter, because I didn't have a big team at some organizations I worked at. But as the hiring manager, working with the recruiter, everything you explained was my experience. sitting down with HR or sending them a note, like, here's what I'm really looking for. Here's are kind of my top things. And it depends on the market as to if we repost a job. See, I get a lot of clients and potential clients I talk to that get frustrated because they see a job they had applied for and it gets reposted. Why did they do that? That's a big question. Another conversation we can talk about another time. And then also from the hiring manager's perspective, there has been times where maybe there weren't a lot of applicants. And then I would go back to HR and I would actually ask, can I see who you screened out? I don't know if you've ever had that situation, Laura,
Yeah.
but I've had that experience where I went through the applications that they handed me. And as their hiring manager, I went back to the recruiter sometimes and said, I also want to see, was there anyone else that applied?
Yeah, we call it recalibrate, right? It's like a recalibration. It's all of a sudden, here's my ask. I'm a hiring manager. This is what I need. This is what my problem I need to solve, and this is the type of person I need to help me solve it. And I provide them, 6 resumes, and they're like, none of these are going to work. What else do you got? And then that's when, as a recruiter and a good business partner, will come in and say, what is it about these resumes that's missing, right? And trying to get ahead of it the same way you're saying, show me who you disqualified for this role. I might bend on some certain things at this point because of supply and demand, and I can't find the right candidate. All of a sudden you're like, I'll teach them that. They don't have to come in strong with that. They might not have, as we understand what is out there and what is available to us from a candidate perspective, then we might have to do a recalibration. And that happens a lot. And also maybe one of the reasons the reposting happens, but it does happen a lot because hiring managers want everything. They want the unicorn. They want one person to do everything that they can possibly think of because they only have this much headcount money to spend on this particular salary and this particular headcount, right? So of course they want to pile it on as much as possible, whatever we can get out of this person. Good hiring managers will have a little bit of a better strategy about how they're building out their team, but that is often the default. And then we end up getting a whole bunch of resumes in and having to do that process of elimination of what are some of the requirements that you, hiring manager, put on that job description that we can eliminate based off of what we're seeing in the candidates coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And back to kind of this big tech world too, where there is a little more formality and the hiring manager doesn't have as much, like we're describing a little bit more of almost like a boutique situation, right? Where the organizations I was with were pretty small and the brand names weren't very large. And so there was a lot of that because there just wasn't that same applicant pool as you'll see at like Amazon, Google, FANG companies, et cetera.
Right.
That is very different where it's pretty rote. And those companies, my best advice I give people is to go read and listen to the YouTube about how to apply at that specific company, because you literally just have to walk through the steps if you don't have an in or you don't have that referral. Yeah. But even then, if you do have someone that can advocate on your behalf, again, you can get around those steps. And even my experience too was if, a fellow colleague or someone in the industry would send me someone's application or say, hey, I know you're looking for this position. I think it would be worth your time to check this person out. I would take that to the recruiter and I would say, hey, please formally put them in the process because I want to make sure I talk to them. And they didn't go through the system at all.
Right. Yeah. That's the best way, right? Is to have somebody that can be an advocate on your behalf. I will say the FANG companies are really good. Their internal recruiters are really good about mining through their own database of applicants. And they don't have to do a lot of outsourcing, as we call it. So they're not having to reach out as much because they have so many people who have applied. And I know specifically within Google, they may look at a certain applicant and then think, what team that I know is looking for this type of person, and they'll be more of your advocate and help you through that process.
Okay, awesome. We have some questions coming in. I just looked down. Sorry, I got distracted, you guys, but Thank you for those of you saying this is insightful. We're so glad it's worthwhile
Yay.
for everybody to be here. So thank you for joining us. This is a really great question from Carol. Does the ATS rank resumes, and how do recruiters use the ranks? Great question, Carol.
That's a really great question. Oftentimes ATS, newer ATS systems, and so brief, fact, I sold ATS software back to recruiters at some point. That was in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. Anyway, some of them do have that ranking, some of them don't. And really, it's up to the recruiter to utilize the system to the best of its ability. So I'll be honest, I never looked at that ranking because I wanted to see, touch, and smell every single resume. Like that was me. I just needed to do that. And I wasn't going to rely on it. Some recruiters rely on it pretty heavily, but it also means you have to utilize the system to its fullest ability. And what I mean by that is every single field needs to be filled out. Every single resume needs to, what we call, go through the workflow process. And if you use the system to its ability, then that would be somebody that would, but I don't know if every recruiter does, because it's a lot of extra work. Yeah. So, yeah.
Another insight I'll add to that is that the person behind the ATS, it's also just like any software or any database. It's only as good as how it was set up. Yeah. I have seen this go well with databases and software rollouts, and I've seen it go very poorly.
Yep.
So from the get-go, what you're saying too is like someone has to set up that workflow. That takes time, that takes effort. And what might work for one job at the company won't work for another, right? And so then there's extra work. So I find too, as I talk to recruiters in my own experience, that a lot of times they just bypass that work. And they're like, I'm just going to do what I know as a recruiter, and I'm going to filter through and have my own system in place, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's with any database, right? Unless it's a required field and you can't move forward unless it's filled out. That drives behavior, right? A required field drives behavior. And if it's not set up that way from a corporation perspective, then the ranking system doesn't matter, and you don't know. Right. Mm-hmm. You don't know what you don't know. And most recruiters, to be honest, don't use the system. At least my generation of recruiters, we'll just like, what, I don't care about the system. I just want to see the resume. Mm-hmm. Really. I don't want to do the dispositioning and going through and the whole, right. It was like, I think when I was at Gap, I don't think it was like 27 clicks just to send the thanks for playing letter. And I'm like, I don't have time. Do you know how many people apply to Gap? Like, I mean, you have to do it to every single person because you get audited if you don't. And so you can sit there for 2, 3, 4 hours at night, just going through and just forcing people to go through the system just to get to the thanks for playing letter. And so most people don't have the time.
Right. That whole concept of why am I being ghosted? Oh, it just feels so impersonal. And to your point, a lot of times it's either an arduous system that just takes too much time and recruiters don't have it, or it wasn't set up, or people move on to the next thing. And it's just, like you said, in HR, you have to be consistent. Otherwise, now there's a liability issue.
Right. That's right. That's right. And I think it's also, there is a different type of recruiter that utilizes the ATS system differently. And there's also going to be different recruiters that build relationships differently, that following up, that ghosting. It's one thing to get it kicked out immediately that you didn't hit the requirements. It's another thing to go through the interview process and that's a whole nother conversation too.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. We have a few more questions. This is great. Thank you guys for your questions. Keep them coming in. Is it better to rewrite the resume for every single job? It's a great question. Or to throw your resume at 1,000 jobs and see where you stick?
If you're not, you can play the numbers game, but I think it's a numbers game. If you're going to have one resume and you're just going to throw it out there and like the spaghetti factor, right? See if it sticks against the wall. But I think you should be tailoring every single resume to every single job, and recruiters will notice the same resume over and over again, and they will notice when you have taken very specific steps to make sure that you are demonstrating the ask of that job description. And remember, I talked about in the company information, we're looking to hire, that's the ask. So have you demonstrated that in your experience, in your professional summary? Do you have numbers around it? Can you demonstrated that you can do it in some way, shape, or form? And then those top 3 to 5 bullet points, top 3 to 5 bullet points on the requirements, those need to be aligned as well. If not, what was your transferable skill that would help cover that particular ask? And you have to be tailoring your resume because of the massive amount of people of the one click, right? You have to stand out. You have to make sure that you look like you're the perfect candidate for the role. Like, oh my gosh, Lisa, she's amazing. Get her in here quick, before she's off the market, right? Mm-hmm. You want that experience to happen. If it's just a generic resume, you're not speaking their language. If any of you know about product management, you can go and look at a product manager job description, and it's going to be different at Salesforce. It's going to be different at Facebook. It's going to be different at Google. It's going to be different at all of the bigger SaaS companies. They all have different language, and you need to speak their language on your resume.
Yes, thank you. So here's my best tip for people. Recruiters they literally don't have the time for language interpretation, right? And when we speak to someone in their own native tongue, oh man, we connect so much faster. Yep. So I always tell people, like, use their words, use their phrases. Don't worry about copy and paste even sometimes if it helps you be efficient, because then quickly it connects the dots for the recruiter. And recruiters typically are not versed in that specific job function, right? So if you're doing acronyms that they're not going to understand or are not in the job posting, it's going to be really hard for them to check the box that you're qualified. They're just going to kind of get confused and maybe put you on that maybe pile, which they might never get back to.
Right. That's true. That's very true. And it needs to happen quickly. You have to connect those dots as quickly as possible. It is the 6 to 7. It's a swipe. It's just like a dating app, right? You're like, nope. It is that fast. So it needs to pop. It needs to, oh my gosh, they are speaking my love language. I get it, right? It's right there. It has to happen.
Yep. Awesome. I'm going to keep moving on questions. So Beth asks, do recruiters retain resumes? Do they ever look back on applications submitted for prior vacancies to see if a prior applicant may be a good fit for a current need?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Good recruiters will. Good recruiters will take those 6 resumes they submitted to the hiring manager. 3 of them got through interviewing. These other 3 are now in their pipeline of maybes for future openings. Especially if the number 1 person took the job and 2 and 3 we had to turn down, they are at the top of the pipeline list. Good recruiters will be building a pipeline of a very specific candidate, especially if they have repeat job descriptions and repeat jobs within that function. So I would say yes. Not all recruiters are good recruiters, right? Some recruiters just want to start from scratch. I've seen that person, I already went by, I already said no to that person. But a good recruiter will be building a pipeline of candidates with a very specific skill set and always dive into their network and see where are they available? Are they interested? Do they know someone? Good recruiters will be building that referral system.
Okay, awesome. And I'll add to that too, that you still should reapply.
Yeah.
Right. Still reapply, because even if they've got your information, they're going to post probably before they go to that database. Typically, is that the flow usually, Laura?
Yeah, well, legally they have to, right? When we open up a job, we legally have to post it at the very least on the website, and it has to be open for 5 days to allow anyone in the organization to throw their name in the hat, right? Even if we've already decided on the person that we're going to give a promotion to so-and-so, we still have to post it to be EEOC compliant. Mm-hmm. So it may get posted. We may already have candidates in the process of interviewing, but it does have to get posted. I would say reapply, and if possible, try to find out who was posting, talk to the recruiter, or figure out who the hiring manager is. hey, I happened to see this. Not sure if you ran across my resume the last time, but saw this was reposted again. Really interested in it. Here's the top reasons, the top 3 things that I can help solve for with, I can go in and I can solve for you. Here's
Yeah, I love that. And even if your resume has changed, like give them the updated, as a former hiring manager, I loved that when someone was persistent and I knew, gosh, they weren't just throwing their name in the hat because they're desperate for a job. They really are connecting with our organization or our mission. Something's going on that's making them want to apply again and take that effort, even though they didn't get it the first time. There's some a little magic behind that, I would say. So,
yeah.
Okay, great. Let's see. How exact do the requirements listed on a resume have to be to pass the workflow?
It's as many, I mean, it's such an arbitrary question, right? I mean, it's a great question, but at the same time, the answer, there's no right answer. It's whatever those requirements have been set by the hiring manager. Like, is this a hard no? Is this a hard yes? Like, though you don't know, is it the top 4? Is it the 5? Is it every single one of those requirements? You don't know. I can just say, if you are demonstrating that you can successfully accomplish the ask, not the requirements, but the ask, in a way that the recruiter or the hiring manager gets you, some of those requirements, even though they were a hard pass originally, based off of your experience, they may say, we might bend the rules for this person because of what they can do and the impact that they can make. So I think statistically, like, women don't apply unless they meet 100% of the requirements, and men apply if they recruit like one of them, whatever. We don't know what the numbers are like, depending on where you're reading the numbers. The statistics are basically men will apply to everything and women don't apply unless it's 100%, right? And I would say that's not that what's more important is that you are demonstrating that you can accomplish the ask and that you can make an impact in the ask, than having your MBA or having this particular, computer science degree at this particular Ivy League school. Doesn't matter. I want to know that you've done the job, that you can do the job, and that you're going to make an impact here. And you've demonstrated that to me, and I didn't have to go looking for it somewhere on the second page of your resume.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's so rare that there are very few job functions in the world that have one path to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And so seeing a diverse candidate that doesn't have all those check boxes, but the recruiter can come to the hiring manager and be like, this candidate's fascinating. Check out what they've done. I think they'd be a really good fit for you. Yeah. They can advocate for you too, if you connect those dots for the recruiter.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you are working with a good recruiter, they will be your advocate. And if you've demonstrated that you can do the job, or something in your past makes sense to them, where they can see, I can see it. I can see how this will be perfect for this particular role.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Tiffany has some really good questions too, to talk about kind of the opposite side, is how much to edit, right? So she asks, should I remove any skills from a resume that do not match the job description to make my resume as short and clear as possible? And in addition, she has another question. I'll ask this at the same time. How many skills can I list on the top of my resume where it kind of covers the bases, but doesn't sound watered down with too many? So like that, bullet, some people put a little quick summary of their skills.
Yeah. That's a good question. So the first question was, what was the first question?
So should I remove some skills to make it as short and clear as possible?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And you should make sure that if you have the skills they're looking for, those are the first skills that you mention in your big list of skills, right? If you're using, let's say, Jira, and they're using Jira and it, I would put that first. If you were using PowerPoint, I don't think, like saying PowerPoint, Excel, Word, if you don't play poker, it's considered table stakes, right? Like at this point, you should have it. It's like saying that, oh, well, here's my landline, or I have a cell phone, right? You should just have a cell phone at this point. And so I don't think, unless it's a writing position or a marketing position or something that relies heavily on written communication or presentation. To me, you can just say Google Suite, right? Microsoft Suite. And if people start saying like, oh, I'm a social media, I know social media, again, that's not a skill. That's just not a skill. So take off skills that are not relevant to the role, add skills that are relevant to the role that you have knowledge of or expertise in, and order them in the way that you want that audience to see them, so that they're not seeing a big, paragraph of skills and going, oh, there's the one I was looking for. Make sure that they stand out and they see them. So either put them at the beginning of that paragraph or at the end, because remember, our eyes are going to see the first few words and the last few words of every paragraph. So use that knowledge to your advantage when it comes to those skills. I also would recommend, and removing anything you don't want to do anything you don't want to do anymore. I have everyone that I work with take a red pen to their resume and cross off anything you never want to do anymore. You don't want to be known for being good at it. You don't, just because you're good at it doesn't mean you have to do it for the rest of your life. Take it off your resume, because as a hiring manager, and I'm like, oh my God, you know how to build dashboards? Perfect. I'm going to give that to you as soon as I hire you, right? Because you say that you're expert building dashboards because you were a business analyst and you would know how to do all that. Great. I'm going to take it off my plate. Thank God I found someone who can take it. Had I known that you hated it, I probably wouldn't have given it to you, because now you're going to be miserable in your role. Right?
Yeah.
So don't put anything on your resume that you don't want to do, even if you're good. Come in as a hero later and have that back pocket knowledge, like, oh man, you didn't know that about me? Of course I knew how to do that. But don't come out of the gate with it.
Oh, it's such great advice. I'll add to that too, that it also helps with the interviewing. So because the last thing you want is for them to bring that up in an interview and you don't light up about it. You kind of go, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're not connecting in the interview. And so, yeah, that's great advice, to remove the things you don't want to talk about or be known for. Yeah. So editing down for sure. And back to the Microsoft, I've seen a lot of posts lately on LinkedIn and people with resume tips out there talking about remove it off of your resume because it should be a given. So it's kind of this modern twist of don't put something on there, excuse me, that's going to make you look less modern or less relevant. And I will say, when it calls it out specifically, and I have seen job postings recently where it specifically says, we want you proficient in Microsoft Office, then make sure it's on there, right? So they can check
100%, right? It's a requirement, and you'll know what's important to them by the order in which we list it. It's just nature for us to list the things that are most important at the top. So use it to your advantage. If they call it out, make sure that it is on there. But for the most part, if it's not on there, or it's the last thing they're looking for, or second to the last, I think it's just there's use that for different real estate to show something else, to highlight something else that's important.
Mm-hmm. I love that. All right. We could keep talking all day, Laura. You're fabulous. But I do want to shift gears just quickly to, you mentioned a little bit about women in particular, and because this is Female Mentor Conversations and you're a mentor today, thank you so much for your time. Is there any advice you've learned as a woman? I know it's a loaded question, so whatever pops into your mind first. Advice you have for women in the workplace that you have learned in your career?
I mean, it's such a loaded question. And off the ATS, you still have to advocate for yourself, a male or female, but you do need to advocate for yourself, and taking a chance on yourself. Like, I always think about applying for jobs that are a skip level, one level above this is what I want. Eventually, this is what I want. So how can I get there, and how can I start advocating now, even in my application process, that this is where I want to go. I think it's really important to be an advocate for yourself and have that plan, and so that you can talk about it a lot, right? This is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. And one thing I think is very, really important, and I wish I had in my career when I was in corporate, was having a mentor within the organization, and somebody to be like your to help sponsor you, to help give you advice, to help you understand how to navigate the internal politics, but also how to make yourself be seen and heard. And having that internal advocate, I think, is so important in advancing your career.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the reasons, like I mentioned my passion project earlier with her career studio and the coaching I do one-on-one, I work with men and women. Her career studio is specific for women early in their career. Is a lot of times people, and Carol just dropped in another question I'll quickly answer as I mention this. A lot of times people are trying to transfer careers. They're trying to figure out how do their past experiences, like Carol mentions, service members who don't want to do the job they did in the military, but that's the only experience they have, right? Figuring out those transferable skills, having a coach, of course, you and I are coaches. So of course, I'm going to mention this, having a coach, having someone neutral party who's not HR, who doesn't have to have the organization's best interests at heart as your mentor, right? Because sometimes we find mentors within our organization, but they do have to keep the company first as well for their job. And so having this neutral party, there's so much gold and so much value in having someone hold the space for you and help you navigate these questions, right? And for your very unique situation, we talk general in these conversations, but then when you go to look at your resume and a job posting, sometimes that realness goes, oh, now what do I do? How do I make this work and make it transfer over so that recruiter will connect the dots? If you have a hard time connecting them yourself, that recruiter is not going to connect with you, right?
Yeah. I think having, and I've done a lot of work. I think we both have done work with veterans and helping with the transferable skills. But I also think it applies to any kind of career pivot, whether it's, in the military moving into private or nonprofit moving into private, and added, like I had somebody coming out of the academia in the science community moving into private. There's just a way to articulate the impact that you could make that sometimes isn't glaring you're right, to the corporation or to yourself. So I do think that it's important to have a coach or somebody to help you along. But I also think more important than the resume and the ATS system, that you know how to tell this story. Because at the end of the day, even if you get the interview, you've got to be able to tell the story. Where those transferable skills are the most meaningful to the company, and what are your stories around how you see those transferable skills being of value to that company. To me, that's more important than the resume and the ATS system. And I will say it till I'm blue in the face, but it's the words that come out of your mouth that get you the job, right? And so being able to articulate those stories, the transferable skills, the experiences that you've had, are important and they're valuable, and being able to craft that story well, I think is going to get you the job over anyone else at the end of the day.
Right. So to clarify, I didn't mention this at the beginning, your resume in the ATS, all it's doing is getting you an interview.
Yeah.
That's all it's doing. Right. And so then you've got to nail that interview next. And so I have seen people panic where they have such a good resume and the transferable skills shine and it connects, but they don't understand the role thoroughly enough. And then they get invited to an interview and they're like, oh, how do I speak to it? They're saying terms I don't understand. So also having someone to explore, like on a day-to-day basis, what would this job look like? What kinds of things do I need to go research before I have that interview so I can speak the language? And also promotions. If we haven't done that role yet, how can you, like you mentioned, explain your impact and how the value you'll bring? So pulling through all the experience from your past that shows that you're ready for that next promotion is key too.
Yeah. And again, that goes from the confidence in yourself and advocating for yourself as well. And we as women are still, evolving our DNA to be better advocates for ourselves. We're not there yet. But we are, and I think it's with groups like this, with honest conversations, crucial conversations, that we need to continue to amplify our voice around, because we do have agency in our career path, and we do have to be a steward for our own career path as well. And whatever resources we marshal in to help that journey happen, that path happen, is only going to get us, closer to where we want to be, and even have some kind of guardrails around it so we kind of stay focused.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again to just remind everybody how they can get more help. I mentioned it earlier, I'm doing free resume reviews. So if you're curious, hey, will this connect with that job? Head over to lisavirtuecoaching.com or hercareerstudio.com. And then I also offer complimentary introductions. I love meeting people. That's just something that I love to do. I love to spend all day talking to people. So I'm happy to chat with you. So please book a call. And then Laura, Meredith Consulting is your company. I know you have meredithconsultingllc.com. You're on LinkedIn. How else can people connect with you?
Yeah, definitely on LinkedIn is the best way to stay connected with me. You can go to my meredithconsultingllc.com page with my contact. You can also, book a discovery call with me as well if you're interested in learning more about what I do. And very similar to what Lisa does, but we do have a little bit of a different market. And I would love to hear from you. So those would be, I know I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm on all the platforms, but booking an appointment with me or reaching out to me at Laura@meredithconsultingllc.com is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put a plug in just for coaches everywhere. Of course, I mentioned I love meeting people. Laura loves meeting people. We're both here letting you know we offer this service. But just any coach that you feel a connection to or something that is drawing you to meeting with them, or you just want to meet with them, take advantage of the free phone calls. I have had people jump on a 25-minute call with me. They end up getting a job and then they thank me for it as if I had anything to do with it. There's so much power in that space, right? So again, we do this for a reason. We want to help. And so all of us offer something free. So take advantage.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me, Lisa. This has been fantastic.
Laura, so much fun. We're getting great feedback on the chat too. So thank you everyone for participating and being here. And please check out our next one next week. We're going to talk about nice girls at work. So that's going to be really fun. And Laura, just so much gratitude to have you here and spending this time behind the scenes. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.